the man who killed his father. There's a kind of love that doesn't come from blood. It comes from choices, from someone seeing you, really seeing you, when the rest of the world hasn't decided you matter yet. That's the kind of love Julius Caesar gave to Marcus Brutus. And what Brutus gave back, well, that's what the story's about. Picture Rome at its peak. Marble everywhere, power dripping from every Senate column. And in the middle of all of it, two men who by every count genuinely loved each other. Caesar was decades older, a general, a conqueror, a man who bent the known world to his will. And Brutus? Brutus was the quiet one, the thinker, the one who read philosophy by candlelight, while other men his age were drinking and gambling with their father's money away. Caesar looked at this young man and saw something rare, something worth protecting. He mentored him, elevated him, gave him political appointments that men twice Brutus's age would have crawled through fire to earn. When Brutus fought on the wrong side of a civil war, literally took up his arms against Caesar, you know what Caesar did? He forgave him, not grudgingly, not with conditions. He opened his arms and said, "Come home, you're still mine." Some historians believe Caesar was Brutus's biological father. We'll never know for certain, but it almost didn't matter. Because what Caesar gave Brutus was something deeper than genetics. He gave him belief. He gave him a future. He treated him like a son in front of the entire Roman world. And in Rome, that meant everything. And Brutus, he loved Caesar back. That's the part people forget. This wasn't some cold-blooded politician waiting for his chance. Brutus admired Caesar, respected him, owed him everything, and knew it. He would have followed that man into the underworld if Caesar had asked. So what happened? Rome happened. Power happened. And 60 men with sharp tongues and sharper knives happened. See, Caesar was consolidating power in ways that made the old guard nervous. He was named Dictor Perpetuum, Director in Perpetuity. He put his face on coins. He packed the Senate with his loyalists and the senators that had spent their entire lives clawing for influence. They watched their relevance evaporate like water on hot stone. So they started talking, quietly at first, in private gardens, at dinners, where the wine flowed a little too freely. Names like Cassius, Casca, and Cimber, men with grievances, men with ambition disguised as principle. And they all understood one thing. Their plot meant nothing without Brutus, because Brutus was the one man in Rome whose name was synonymous with honor. If Brutus stood with him, it wasn't murder, it was justice, it was liberation. Cassius was the architect, and oh, he was good. He didn't walk up to Brutus and say, "Let's kill your father figure." No. He was surgical. He planted questions. Do you really think one man should hold this much power, Brutus? He left anonymous letters where Brutus would find them, messages that read like the voice of Rome itself, begging him to act. Brutus, are you sleeping? Are you not the real Brutus if you allow this? And here's where the tragedy really begins, because Brutus wasn't stupid, he wasn't naive, he saw exactly what Cassius was doing. But something inside him, that philosopher's brain, that obsession with virtue, it cracked open a door. And once that door was open, doubt walked in and made itself at home. He started asking himself questions no man in his position should ask. What if they're right? What if I love Caesar too much to see clearly? What if my loyalty is actually cowardice? What if Rome needs me to do one thing I can't bear to do? Brutus didn't sleep for weeks. The man didn't sleep. His wife Portia saw him pacing at night, hollow-eyed, barely eating. She stabbed herself in the thigh, literally drove a blade into her own flesh just to prove she was strong enough to share his burden. That's how dark energy in that house had become. And somewhere in those sleepless nights, Brutus made his decision. He convinced himself, and this is the key. He convinced himself that killing Caesar wasn't betrayal, it was sacrifice. He told himself he loved Caesar, the man, but he loved Rome more. He told himself that Caesar had become a threat to the Republic, and that a true Roman would put the Republic above any single person, even a person he loved. How noble, how beautifully principled, how perfectly convenient that the most honorable choice that happened to be the one that elevated Brutus to the center of Roman history. March 15, 45 BC. The Ides of March. The Senate meets in the theater of Pompey. Caesar almost doesn't come. His wife, Calpurnia, begged him to stay home. She'd had nightmares, visions of his blood on her hands. A soothsayer had already warned him. The signs were everywhere, but Caesar was Caesar. He didn't hide from omens. He walks in. The Senate rises. It looks like any other day. And then Cimber approaches, grabs Caesar's toga, pulls it from his shoulder. This was the signal. They swarm him. Casca strikes first. A clumsy, panicked slash across Caesar's neck. Caesar spins, grabs the blade, fights back. For a moment, this 55-year-old man is a general again, struggling against the tide. Daggers come from everywhere. 23 wounds, they'll count later. 23. And then, in the middle of all the chaos, the blood, the screaming, Caesar sees him. Brutus, standing there, blade in hand. And something in Caesar's face changes. It isn't anger, it isn't shock, it's heartbreak. Pure, world-ending heartbreak. Kai su tek nun. You too, my child? Some scholars say he said it in Greek, because it was more intimate. Latin was for politics. Greek was for the people you actually loved. Caesar didn't cry out to the Senate. He didn't curse the conspirators. His last conspicuous thought, with 32 stab wounds bleeding his life onto the marble, was for Brutus. And Brutus looked back. He looked into the eyes of the man who had loved him, forgiven him, raised him up from nothing, and he drove his blade in anyway. Caesar fell at the base of Pompey's statue, wrapped himself in his toga so he would die with dignity, even in death. He was more composed than every man who killed him. Now here's where Brutus's beautiful plan falls apart, because he genuinely thought that Rome would thank him. He walked out of that Senate chamber with blood on his hands and freedom on his lips and expected applause. Adorable. Rome didn't applaud. Rome went silent. Then Rome went furious. The citizens who had loved Caesar, the common people he'd fed, entertained, fought for, they looked at these senators with their expensive togas and their bloody knives, and they saw exactly what it was. Not liberation, not justice, murder. Rich men killing the one powerful man who actually cared about them. But Brutus still had a chance, a small one. He gave a speech, stood before the people, and made his case. I loved Caesar, but I loved Rome more. It was eloquent. It was reasoned. For about 5 minutes, it even worked. And then, Mark Antony stepped up. If Brutus was a philosopher, Antony was a performer. And what he did at Caesar's funeral was the single greatest act in political destruction in recorded history. He stood over Caesar's body, the actual corpse, mangled, torn, displayed for all of Rome to see. And he spoke. He didn't attack Brutus directly. That was the genius. He called Brutus an honorable man, over and over, Brutus says Caesar was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. Each time he said it, the word honorable rotted a little more. By the 5th time, it was an insult. By the 10th, it was a death sentence. He held up Caesar's will, read it aloud. Caesar had left money to every single Roman citizen. He left his private gardeners to the public. This was the tyrant they killed? This was the man so dangerous he had to die? The crowd lost its mind. They ripped apart the Senate benches for wood, built a funeral pyre right there in the forum. Then they went hunting for conspirators. Brutus ran. The liberator of Rome, the man who killed for the Republic, he ran like a thief in the night, chased from the city he supposedly saved. Funny how that works. What followed was 2 years of slow, grinding destruction. Brutus and Cassius fled east, raised armies, tried to build a new power base, but Rome had already moved on. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, barely 20 years old, allied with Antony. Together, they declared the conspirators enemies of the state. Everything Brutus had sacrificed for, everything he'd destroyed his soul to protect, the Republic, the Senate, the old ways, none of it survived. And Brutus, he was coming undone. Ancient sources say Caesar's ghost visited him, appeared in his tent the night before the final battle and said, "You will see me at Philippi." Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the meaning is the same. Brutus couldn't escape what he'd done. It lived behind his eyes. It sat with him at every meal. It whispered to him in every silence. His allies started dying. Cassius, convinced they'd lost a battle, they were actually winning, ordered his own servant to kill him. The liberators were eating themselves alive. October 42 BC, Philippi, northern Greece. The second battle, Brutus's army is crushed. His men are dead or surrendering. There is no escape, no negotiation, no future. Brutus takes the sword. Some say a friend held it steady for him. He speaks his last words, and depending on which historian you trust, they are either the most self-aware or the most pathetic words ever spoken by a dying man. O wretched virtue, you were nothing but a word, and yet I worshipped you as though you were real, but you were just a slave of fortune. Read that again. In his final breath, Brutus admitted virtue, the thing he'd built his entire identity around. The principle he'd used to justify murdering the man who loved him was empty. It was a word, a story he told himself so he could sleep at night. And in the end, it bought him nothing but a sword in his stomach and a legacy drenched in blood. He was 43 years old. He died in the dirt, thousands of miles from Rome, surrounded by the wreckage of a cause that was dead before it started. And Caesar became a god, literally. Rome defied him. His name became a title, Caesar, Tsar, Caesar, a word for supreme power that echoed through civilizations for 2,000 years. Every emperor that followed carried his shadow. The republic Brutus killed for, it died anyway, replaced by an empire built on ashes of everything the conspirators feared. Brutus killed the man who loved him to save a system that was already dying. And in doing so, he destroyed himself, his family, his friends, his reputation, and the very republic he claimed to protect. He wanted to be remembered as Rome's savior. Instead, his name became a synonym of betrayal. 2,000 years later, when someone stabs you in the back, what do you say? Et tu, Brute? Not Cassius, not Casca. Brutus. Always Brutus. He thought he could kill love and call it duty. He thought virtue could wash blood off a blade. He thought history would call him a hero. History had other plans, because karma never misses. It strikes deep.